Hello world, welcome to the 81st Climate Change Emergency Awareness Protest. I'm here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, USA. Again, this is the 81st Climate Change Protest. Next week will be the 82nd, and that'll be on July 3rd, hopefully early in the morning. Right now, the CO2 level is around 416.5 parts per million. The significance of this, as I've said many times before, is that mankind has only been around when parts per million have been 200 parts per million to 280 parts per million. So right now we're at 416, which has very bad potential for all life on Earth. We're working ourselves into a runaway greenhouse event, and with abrupt climate change and abrupt heating. Presently, the coronavirus in the world is spiking again, as to be expected, because the whole world runs on capitalism. And what would the world be if we weren't making money on each other and having winners and losers? So this coronavirus thing with the second spike is going to be horrendous, even worse than the first spike. It already is in the United States. Many countries of the world are not allowing Americans to venture into their countries, and that's justifiable because we're out of control here. And you go shopping and you see a lot of people without masks and all when they're within inches of each other, and it's really crazy. The coronavirus, though, is an opportunity, though, to fix the climate change, or try to address the climate change issue. I don't think it's fixable, but we can at least attempt to make some life be able to survive and come up with some solutions of some sort. But right now, people don't, in the United States especially, don't even know that climate change is such a dire event, and that within 3 years we're all going to have trouble just trying to get around, and by 6 years we're going to have trouble existing. But give or take a couple years. But it's ending. It's going to be a horrendous situation coming up, and people don't even know what's happening. I'm standing here on the square, and I see people going about their lives, which you have to do. But it's all for the wrong reasons. Everyone's with their big trucks and everything and scrambling like everything's normal, but it's not. We're in a very bad situation, and we got to start mitigating the calamity that's coming. But as you can tell, with all the trucks and everything, there's no chance here. This is watching a slow suicide in motion, and if this was one of your friends doing this, you'd call for help and try to get some intervention and try to save their lives. But I see dead people walking, I see dead people driving, and it's a sad way to look at that. And I see kids running around, and it's like, I realize they're not going to have a full life the way things are going, and it's heart-wrenching to watch this, and it's very upsetting at times. And you try to detach and just do this from a scientific point of view, but you are human, and it does tend to rip at your heartstrings, and to realize what's happening, and the blatant, just out of control spending, and not caring about the environment or anything, and it's really scary to watch. Anyways, climate change will be much more horrendous than what people know, and it'll come to be, and it'll do what it does. The Paris Agreement was trying to keep the temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius increase over supposed industrial times, which they say is 1880, but that's not true. It's the late 1700s is when industrialization started. But splitting hairs anyway. The fact is that we're about to blow past that, the 1.5 degrees, and we're tunneling towards the 2 degree mark. And what will happen at 2 degrees is that you get a billion people that will be suffering from heat exhaustion and extreme heat, and they won't be able to live where they live. And at 3 degrees Celsius, you get 2 billion people that won't be able to live where they live. So this is shaping up to be a calamitous event. And hold on here. There they go. State police on a roll. So, Jesus. Well, that was fun. So they're going about 75 miles an hour through town. I hope they don't hit anyone. So right now we're at 560 parts per million equivalency for CO2, and as I said, 280 is the maximum you want to exceed and not have the environment changing. So what's going to happen eventually is that you're going to have a food insecurity issue. And that's what it all comes down to, is not only the heat, but food insecurity. And people won't be able to be fed. And you're going to end up with mass starvation. And the side effects is that you end up with war and all sorts of pillaging and killings and things like that. It ends up being a Mad Max situation. We kind of got a glimmer of that when the shelves got cleared out here in the United States with the coronavirus for certain things. And people were going into a panic. So, what do they think is going to happen, when the climate change happens? But you got to know there's an issue before you can even address the issue. And right now, no one wants to pay attention to it, and the media won't report it. So, until everyone gets on board with this situation, it's not going to happen. We're not going to get out of this situation. And you can't address the situation unless you know there is a situation. As far as I know, 17% of the Amazon forest has been cut down, and what's going to happen is they're going to hit a tipping point where it just goes beyond, and one thing causes another, where the trees start dying off. We saw that at one of our friends' house, their trees started dying, then the bugs came in and got more of the trees, and pretty soon it ended up being basically an open area that was once a forest. I mean, her land is down. It was a couple acres of land, and there are basically 13 functioning trees. So it's no fault of hers. It's just the environment's changing, and you get these bugs that'll bore into the trees because they don't die in the winter now, because the winter's no longer so cold. So what you're going to have eventually, though, with the environment is a wet bulb effect, and that's 35 degrees Celsius, where it's a situation where at 35 degrees Celsius, the temperature sustains that amount for periods of time, which is 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The human body can't cool down unless you have air conditioning. So you get heat exhaustion, heat collapse, and people end up dying with that. So it'll become a word it'll become a common word in our jargon eventually. It'll be the wet bulb effect, not heat bulb, sorry. A wet bulb effect. So, it's 95 degrees at a constant level, and if the grid goes down, you're going to see people dropping over like flies, because the human body's at 98.6, so it can't cool down. So, presently Siberia reached 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit last week, and you had Caribou, Maine even reach 96 degrees. So these areas are way far north, and some really amazing is happening with the environment. I think we've already entered into the, as they would say with the black hole, the event horizon. And that, you're into a situation, you don't know you're in it until you look back in time and go, oh, that's when it happened. I think we've entered that situation where the system is collapsing now, and the Earth is finally responding the way everyone in the scientific community at least has thought it would respond. And that it's coming back to get us and trying to shake us off like a dog with fleas. The dangerous situation is you're going to end up abrupt heating, and that could occur at any time. Presently, the permafrost up in the Arctic area is venting off massive amounts of CO2 and methane. And an interesting little factor is the thermal karst lakes, which are lakes that they just sit on the surface in the summer, and 20% of the Arctic has this. There are millions of them around. The soil below thaws, and they form these taliks below the lakes that stay permanently unfrozen during the winter. So the microbes that eat up and cause the discharge of CO2 and methane allow the methane CO2 to bubble up into these lakes, and even if the surface is frozen, once the lake unfreezes, you get the venting off of the CO2 and methane. So that's a severe greenhouse gas, and I think the Arctic, everything comes down to the Arctic, and once the Arctic goes, we're in trouble, and the Arctic is starting to go now. So there's a lot of theories, a lot of people worried about the Blue Ocean event, and I contend that that's very important, in that the sun, when it comes down and beats down on the Arctic Ocean, it'll retain the heat. But by then, I think it's game over anyhow, because the fringe of the Arctic, where the permafrost is venting off so much CO2 and methane. There are 1,800 gigatons of available CO2 in the atmosphere, or in the permafrost. So it's 1,800 gigatons. and I think it's the Earth has only 700 or 500 gigatons in the atmosphere right now. So there's 3 times as much gigatonnage available for CO2 and methane. Just hasn't even vented off yet. So you get a 50 gigaton burp, that's significant. That's a 10% increase of CO2 into the atmosphere. If that happens in the Arctic, and that could easily happen at any moment. We wouldn't even know it happened because no one lives up there. Presently, it's taken 8,000 years for the Holocene event, which is 12,000 years ago till now. It's taken 8,000 years to get to this point, and in the last 80 years, as far as heating goes, in the last 80 years, we've put more heat into the environment, and the temperature has gone up more in 80 years than it has in the last 8,000 years. So that gives you an idea of how bad things are. You can have geologic methane as well as the thermokarst lakes, karst lakes. Sorry. You can have geologic methane, which are trapped pools of methane that are around oil domes and things like that, and they could easily go into the atmosphere as well. So there's many ways you can die from this situation, and it's nothing is good right now because no one's acting on the dire situation, acting like it's an emergency that it is. We should be in an all-out panic, and we're not. So it comes down to this, whether you have the right politicians or wrong politicians, or right leaders or wrong leaders, we obviously have no leaders that have any solutions or have any idea or want to identify any idea that we're in trouble. And people need to reevaluate. This is our last chance to do things in the right way and to get people in charge that know what they're talking about, and to have groups get together and come up with ideas immediately, not to have a long-term 1-year discussion about it. So, this last vote we're having in the United States, this is the last chance we have, when you're picking president of the United States. In my mind, Biden and Trump, they're much the same. They don't acknowledge the situation. Biden's sort of giving it lip service, but he'll get in charge and then he won't do anything. And then when it becomes absolutely untenable and you can't do anything about it at all, he'll come up with the idea we need to do something. So there should be panic right now. There should be the word of the day is panic, and it's not happening. So people aren't getting the dire idea that we're into a bad situation. The leaders aren't getting the idea. The media's not getting the idea, and it's not a good situation. And this is going to end badly. So unless things change soon, I don't give much hope. But people need to get out, protest, and do a talk or do whatever they need to do. Hold on. People need to do what they need to do to get online and get out outside and make people aware that we're in a dire situation. Sitting around will not get the job done, and it will make the dog hunt. So hopefully people will start getting out. I haven't seen it at all yet around here, and I don't fully expect to see it ever until it's too late. And it's getting to that point now, and they won't know it's happening until it actually happens. So hopefully I'll see you next week, and I wish I could say something better, but it's blunt talk is needed at this point, and people need to know what's happening, even though I didn't quite probably summarize everything the way I should. But you're getting the idea that it's a dire situation. So I'll see you next week. And on Tuesday I'm doing my running blog that I do every week in my attempt to break the world record in a mile in a year from now for my age group. See ya.